Take yourself back to that place where you have always felt at ease. The place you can be you. We all have had that place surrounded by family and friends. And early in my life, I thought this place was Peru. This wasn't because of the legitimate beauty of the South American paradise, but rather because of the experiences I'd had. As a child, I'd become accustomed to the warm weather, constant access to the outdoors, and getting to play sports daily. That young, naive kid believed Peru to be his official home, and at 7 years old, at 10 years old, he wasn't yet mature enough to understand that when you move, you must also move on. Just a month or two before my family was set to move for China, I went off into a full spiral, questioning why I put all this effort into friendships just to have it torn away at the will of my father's company. I mean, just an example of how stressful those last few weeks were, one of my cats, Mittens, decided she'd had enough and ran away. Never to be seen again. Jump forward a couple months and it's mid-February, and I arrived at the British School of Shanghai just in time to begin my second semester of fourth grade year. This was where I began to swerve off the tracks. As a fourth grader in a new country, I had no one. I was utterly alone and isolated within my own thoughts of inadequacy and loneliness, believing no one cared about me. I was so scarred from the previous move that I was reluctant to go out and meet friends, thinking that it would just be temporary and it could be torn away at any time. I mean, I was so successful in isolating myself at the British school that I decided the only way to maybe get back on track was to switch midway through the year to Concordia as a new fifth grader, hoping I wouldn't stick out and could blend into the crowd. Although I found a group of friends I somewhat fit into, I was reluctant to open up and kept my emotions locked away, as I often thought of these friendships as a temporary arrangement until it was time to move again. These traits have stuck with me up until this day, where I'm still rather reluctant to open up. Each summer, I work as a caddy. The job is a people job, where one's supposed to be relatable and outgoing to get a good tip. For me, I always seem to remain reserved, fearing that one slip-up would cause the golfer not to like me. When they ask the simple questions, I often answer with the one-word answers and get quick to the point, afraid that what they find on the inside isn't what they wanted to see. I believe this all goes back to one early September day in 2012, my first real day of American life. I start my voyage as a teenager in America at a private day school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, hoping maybe I'd be able to fit into a society I'd been 8 years removed from. To this day, I can still recall the nerves I felt as I walked towards the old 1800s building that was my new school. Fight or flight kicked in. I should run, I thought to myself, as I stepped into the common room lost in the sea of new faces. Taking a seat on the benches, my thoughts hit me. What am I doing here? How can I fit in? How can I fit in? Looking back on this, the neon yellow shirt I was wearing that read "Eat, Train, Sleep," an overgrown buzz cut, definitely didn't help. I'd yet to be exposed to vineyard vines. But back to being more serious. The thought that kept rushing through my head was, how do I fit in? This was not the right thought to have when entering a new school as a kid who had lived abroad in 2 different countries. Rather than sharing my views in my first class, I fell into a cycle where for those early first few weeks, I would just remain reserved and try not to be noticed. Over the course of the next few weeks, I tried my best to fit in, Googling American culture and trying to just live in the shadows until I knew what I'd missed out on. When someone did something, I was quick to follow. When someone wore a style, I went home and bought a similar style. In math, when people copied the answers from the back of the textbook, I followed. In English, although I read the first book assigned, I was quick to pick up that most of my friends were using SparkNotes, an online resource that summarizes books. After watching a few of them hand in essays they'd copy and pasted and not get caught, I again decided to follow. Only this time, I was the unlucky one to get caught. After a few months of following, my facade collapsed. I don't think anyone but my 8th grade English teacher, Mr. Rossiter, and I know how these next events transpired. I come into the next class oblivious, and I don't recall the details of the class, just that when it ends, I am pulled aside and taken into Mr. Rossiter's tiny, clustered 6x6 office and told in a stern voice to sit down. He tells me he knows I copied the SparkNotes summary and just wanted me to learn from the experience. But what followed next surprised me just as much as it did him. I opened up to him, telling him everything I'd been going through since the move. And in response, he was caring enough to help listen anytime I needed it for the remainder of the year. Somehow, with his help, I made it through the first year in America. Definitely not as glorious as I thought it would be. Next up, freshman year. Typically a time of new beginnings, at least for most. Not for me. I fell back into the previous year's cycle of just trying to make it through the day, and the pattern continued until I decided I needed some sort of new beginning. That's when in early January, I found an abroad program, Swiss Semester, and applied. Swiss Semester, known to me as Swiss, is a 90-day semester abroad program in Zermatt, Switzerland, with 50 other high school students. I waited in anticipation for the day I left. At long last, September 11th rolled around, and I pulled up nervously to JFK. I walk into the airport, check in, and walk over to the gate, with the opposite thoughts rushing through my head. Let's just have fun. What's the worst that can happen? Did I pack too preppy? Sitting close to the gate, I eventually summed up the courage to introduce myself to a bored-looking kid who would soon become one of my closest friends. This was my shot at a first impression. After some small talk, I suggest we get some Shake Shack along with a few others. As we waited in line, Jack abruptly said, I shaved my hair pink. I dyed my hair pink and shaved my legs. I turned to him utterly confused, soon coming to learn that this was just the type of person he was. But looking back on this, I now admire the courage it took for him to say this, and wish I had that trait that just lets me open up to anyone at any time. So for those next 3 months and beyond, I just tried to be a better version of myself. During Swiss, I took my identity as a preppy New Englander to the extreme. Before the trip, I made sure to have a collection of vineyard vines that would last me a lifetime. I traded the neon yellow shirt for salmon pink pants. The second day of class arrives, and I decided to put on the soon-to-be famous pair of pink pants and a baby blue collared shirt. Almost instantly, people noted the salmon pink pants and were looking for excuses to wear them for the remainder of Swiss. Although not as actively worn, I still have those pink pants, and I do still wear most of the Vineyard Vines apparel I bought for Swiss. I do not have the time nor willpower to go into how I forged my identity at Swiss. That's a story for another time. But take this as what you will. I came to find that expressing myself was so much better than living day to day in the shadows. The other day, when taking a Polaroid and writing, "What would you tell your younger self?" the phrase, "be yourself," came to mind. And although sure I have my quirks, I have come to learn that I should not worry so much as to what others think about me, but rather what I think of myself. I just wish I could have told myself to remember that nothing is final and we are all imperfect, such as being human. So if I leave you with nothing else, it's to try not to fit the mold, but rather break it and forge your own path. Thank you.